All right, welcome back to the Educator Wellness Revolution podcast. And we're going to do something a little different today, which is our normal host is going to be interviewed because Gracy Obuchowicz is an expert in self-care, and that is our topic for the day. Because self-care is a pressing need for everyone right now, and it really has gone through life cycles of how people feel about that word and how people react to hearing self-care and the way that they feel like they need to practice it in their own lives. And we are going through things as a community, as a country right now that have made a lot of people feel an increased need to care for themselves as they care for their community. And so we just want to talk about all the ways that is affecting our community, but educators specifically, and how it has changed our work, perceptions of self-care, and all of those things. So we're really glad to be able to talk to this expert, Gracy, and all these things. So I want to start with this, Gracy, because we're in schools all the time and hearing from educators about what that their needs are from an educator wellness perspective. And we often kind of offer a menu of options, and we think about it as like, what do you need individually? What do we need for the culture here? And what do we need to change the organization or the systems? And those demands change a lot, or what we're seeing rising to the top. But I think especially since November, there are some things that are kind of more in demand, and ways that kind of perceptions of individual needs or self-care have changed. So what have you seen become more of a focus since the election, less of a focus? What's changing?
Hi, everyone. It's super weird to be on the side
Mhm.
of the podcast, but I'm also cool and I'm happy to be here to talk about self care. What's changed? I do think of wellness and self care as being on like a pendulum, and I think that there are ways that we talk about it that cannot feel as complete, and then we swing the other direction. And I think that when we were coming into this educator wellness conversation right after the pandemic, that it was about like, let's not just talk about self-care being this individual practice that like really like we can't, if we're looking at just how I'm taking care of myself in a vacuum, that we're not paying attention to these other layers of staff culture and dynamics with leadership and these bigger policy and systems issues that are creating the stress. So I think people are like very hungry to like not talk about self-care but talk about those other pieces. And there was a big appetite when we went into schools to like let's kind of try to tackle what we haven't had language to tackle before. And now I think we're kind of exhausted as how I'm reading us, that like we're trying to make systems change. In Empower Ed, we really understand just how difficult systems change really is that you don't just go testify once about how a policy needs to be different and then they change it for the whole city. It's like changing mindsets and organizing, and all of that is like really, really deep work. And I think we're in a moment now where we felt like maybe we were like gonna make some progress on some things, and it's like that shoots and ladders game. I think we like hit a big shoot, and we're kind of in a place that we didn't think we could get to so quickly. And I'm sensing everyone's like exhausted from the amount of work it even took to get to that shoot, and trying to recover from the fall. And now it is like, okay, what is in our locus of control? And now we're like the pendulum swung the other way to be like, oh, we like really need to take care of ourselves. Like we need to put that attention back on ourselves as individuals and look at how we're managing that stress and how we can kind of uplift ourselves outside of what is uncontrollable right now. So in schools, we've been having, especially this week, a lot of conversations around like your self-care practices. We've been doing this exercise called the self-love languages, which are the love languages, but like, quality timing, like do you recharge by spending time with people that you love on the weekends, or are you like a touch person, and do you need to like take a nice shower and wear comfortable clothes? And people love that exercise. We've done it so much and it's just so evocative. And I'm like, I'm not sure we could have done that exercise and had it so well received in 2021, but here we are 2025, and like it just seems to be what people need. So there's something flexible and changing about our definitions of self-care that can feel a little hard to define, but I think it's ultimately what makes it powerful.
Yeah, thank you. I actually just did that worksheet, the self-love languages worksheet, at the school that I was at this morning, and it was really well received. And I think the reason for that is exactly what you said. It feels in our locus of control. That's something that like we can handle in the immediate. And I know in the environment that we're in right now, especially in DC with so many federal threats that we're under. It just feels like so much is out of our control. And so any little piece that we can really like hone in on and practice that self-care feels really powerful. I think in that vein, something that I've been seeing on social media a lot, and something that I think in activist circles, self-care sometimes has like, self-care can be a bad word, right? I don't have time for self-care. I think a lot of activists feel like they need to set that on the back burner. And the reason for that, in my opinion, is that self-care often gets characterized as just tuning out. So is it possible to engage in self-care so that you can, be in this work for the long run, without just putting your head in the sand?
Short answer to that is yes. Longer answer to that is that it is complicated, because it's not untrue that like self-care is not enough. And I think if you are not looking at self-care and wellness from an equity lens, like that's incomplete. And because I think privilege is a huge part of that. And I think that there are ways that, if you do have more privilege in the society, be it money or skin color or position even within a school, of like, do you have more power within the school system that you're in, that like your self-care is going to just like win over other people's realities sometimes. Like if you're a school leader and you feel really uncomfortable about taking time off and you don't do it and you never model that for your staff, like that's going to have like a very real impact on the people that are around you. And so it becomes this thing that like what we do for ourselves, especially if we hold any kind of power, gets amplified and it sets the tone and actually becomes the norm. And so that's like deeply powerful for systems work too. And then also, that there are moments where like, me as like being a white woman and like, I'm just like, oh, I can check out of this. And like, I'm going to have privilege to like, just take care of myself and kind of be like, I can't change any of that. That's too messy. And yet like, I think, there's a demand upon me too, to like work to like change that systems too, because I do hold power within it. So I think it's always like, yes, and that like, we can't just escape, because ultimately it's not going to work out for like the greater wellness that we live in if we're not willing to make ourselves uncomfortable sometimes. And I do think self-care is not just about feeling good all the time. I think it is about doing the things where you feel like you are completing your stress cycles, and feeling a sense of growth and increased capacity, and really tending to the triggers within ourselves, which are often very like deep intergenerational pieces that need a lot of tending and caretaking and space. And none of that is easy. Like that's really hard work. And like, we do need to pamper ourselves sometimes, sure. But I do think the real work of self-care can be really hard sometimes too.
It's just like so interesting because like the system is totally on fire. And it's interesting to see this shift to a focus more on like how can I be well, but it's so important. I don't know, what the right metaphor for it is, but like there's a fire and I'm like, I can't even hold the fire extinguisher right now, right? Like I'm trying to put it out, but I can't even be the firefighter that I want to be in this moment. I think a lot of people are feeling that, but it's like it comes down to like such individual minute by minute decisions. Like I feel that in our team all the time when we're thinking about like advocacy things that are going on at the moment, right? Or Caroline and I will be like, there's this meeting and there's this action and there's this other thing. And it's like, are you going to go? Am I going to go? Should we both go to this? Do we not need to go to this at all? We've done too many things today. And I think everybody's facing those kind of decisions. Like it just keeps coming at you. And you got to also draw the lines of being like, actually, we're doing a lot. And we are trying to fight the fire, right? But we have to make this a priority. So I think just like thinking about like a self-care as a practice, I'm curious how you think about like, should the practice of self-care like look different when we're in times of peak anxiety, like about things that are going on in the country, or calmer times, or like, should it just be a steady practice?
That's a good question. I think it depends. All of it. There's like, I really resist any like self-care framework to be like, this is what it is. Cause I think the moment you like be like, this is what it is, it's gonna change, because that is just like fundamental to who we are as human beings and what life is too. So I think that there is one rework that has helped for me a lot is that instead of thinking of self-care as something I do, I think of self-care as like a lens that I put on everything around me in a way. It's like it's like a responsive lens. It's a generative lens. It is like a trusting lens. It's a respectful lens, just being like, who's here right now, including me, what's happening right now, where's my wisdom like telling me like needs to be tended to, and what actually could be released. And this is not easy, because I think we do have a lot of patterning in us to be like always put out the fire, and I think we all, and anyone who's been an activist has known that there are times where you're like, I'm like here for justice and righteousness, and then you actually hurt somebody in that way because you're so programmed to like try to put out the fire all the time. And it does that. I think those lessons are really powerful for us to learn from too. But I think it's a learning lens too, to be like, all right, like right now this feels like the right choice to make, and it might not be the right choice to make. Like I might sit this one out, and that actually was the fight that like turns out later would have been really good for me to be there. And like, I don't know that, you don't know that, but I do think it's like we have to try, and we have to like understand that we have boundaries and other people around us have boundaries, and that like you look at like the practice of activism like over the centuries, and people like it's a health concern when we don't tend to ourselves. Like that amount of stress that you can carry if you were carrying so much, it's like the Audre Lorde stuff, like it's like deeply important for like an act of like political warfare to care for self, to just be able to endure and to like make sure. And again, bringing in the equity lens too, just looking at who has less kind of societal space to rest. And like, I know I love the work of Rest and Rise, Caroline, because I do think it is about just being like, no, this is not a space where you have to fight. Like this is the space where you get to like be replenished as like a Black educator, and that is deeply important. And maybe as like a white educator, you might need to push yourself a little bit more if you do come from privilege. And that's a very controversial opinion, but I don't think that like wellness is complete unless we can bring that perspective into it either.
Yeah, I thank you for mentioning that positionality piece. And I do think for Rest and Rise, like one of the things that had generated the idea or the need for that was just that I saw a lot of Black educators were pushing themselves more to do advocacy, because it was a need for our communities. And for those of you that don't know, Rest and Rise is Empower Ed's Black educator social group, which is literally just a space for community building. So people can gather and socialize and build each other up. And it is a space where we do not ask any advocacy related anything of the people that show up in that space. But I think just to circle back to one of the other things I heard you say, Gracie, is just this idea that like self-care can condition you to listen to yourself and listen to the circumstances around you, and really sit with the positionality that you are bringing to a circumstance and figure out how you are inhabiting that circumstance. And that's a really important lesson for activism and for, sustainability. Because you're right, there are times when you need to sit back and like figure out what your identity and your privilege teaches you about how and whether you should show up in a certain space. And I think that's really important. So there are definitely transferable lessons from self-care that we can take into some of this community work. And that leads me to my next question, which is self-care and community care sometimes are positioned as just being totally opposed. But is there a way that we can balance both self-care and community care responsibly?
Can you imagine, would you want to hang out with a community of people who are not taking care of themselves? Is like the way that I think about that.
I
No.
literally the other day heard someone being interviewed. They're putting a new well, there's the idea that they're going to put a new wellness thing in Poplar Point in DC, and they were talking about that. And I will mention who was being very grouchy about the idea of doing it at all, and the merits to be discussed and finances and other things. But they were like, "Man, I think you're the person who needs to go to the to this wellness resort the most, because it is like sometimes those people who are just like go go go. It's like, yeah, I think if you don't take a rest now, the rest of us are going to need a rest from you."
Yeah.
Hmm.
Again, like we have to look back to understand how to move forward differently. And I think if we look at like even the people with the best intentions, the most like liberation focused intentions, like those communities can tear each other apart. And I think it is like self-care is not going to save us. It's like you still need to like figure out how to show up in relationship and be responsible in like your dynamics and what you're bringing to it. But I don't know how you do that without self-care. So like I'm willing to be challenged if there's like a way to do that without like tending to yourself and making sure that your basic needs are met. Because at the end of the day, for me, like it's a nervous system issue that like we are programmed through, you know, millennia to like have these like heightened nervous systems that like pick up on fear, pick up on threat, pick up on difference, that like go into fight or flight, which is like those are the dynamics that can often destroy communities and like community advocacy efforts. And like you know, we can co-regulate with each other, and I think in like the best communities we do that. Is that like being around your nervous system makes me feel safer, and then we can do great creative generous grounded work together. But if you're not sleeping, if you're not eating, if you're kind of in a dysfunctional relation dynamics all over the place that are just like feeding you with like a toxic energy, like it's just very hard to show up and be able to do that, the really I don't even know the right word for it. The like transformational work that's necessary to be able to do that. And again, I think to be able to be in community, like we have to be willing to be changed. And this is, I go to a Unitarian church in DC, and one of the ministers there said, like, you don't have to, like, you can come as you are, but you're not allowed to leave as you are. So like you come being your full self, but you have to be willing to be changed to be in this space.
I love that.
And I think that that is like what good advocacy should do, is that we should be transformed as individuals and like, you know, have our hearts opened and our minds opened. And to do that, I think does require some self-care. I define that as self-care, at least. What do you all
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I love that way to think about it too, because I think that is kind of like the attitude you want people to come into activism with too, right? Which is like you want it to be inclusive, you want everyone to feel not just welcome in it, but like that they actually feel like their voice is critical to what you're doing, and their experience, their lived experience is essential in the conversations that you're having. Um, but yeah, I think it's like Caroline said, knowing what the right spaces are and where is the right place for you to be in that conversation, and then when is the right time to not be, right, both for yourself and for the community.
Yeah. I really loved that term that you used, the co-regulation, like co-regulating yourself and others in community spaces. That feels really powerful because, like, as Scott was saying, um, and as your minister was saying, you need to be in a space where you are regulated enough to intake necessary opinions and feedback from others. And that requires being in community. That requires that muscle that allows you to really listen and change and transform yourself so that you can transform the world around you. And
Yeah.
it's also something that teachers do a lot, right? Is co-regulate classes in community spaces.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like one of those things. It's like we get trained to be experts on things, and then it's really tough to do them for yourself in all kinds. I mean, that's true for a lot of things, right? But so like speaking of the daily life of educators, so like this is like in some ways I like can't stand, we're like seeing the constant notifications and it's so stressful. Carolina and I were just talking about like it doesn't feel good in either way. Like it's like if I just see it all happen in real time, it's a constant shock to the nervous system. But if I put my phone away for a while and then I see it all at once, it's it's really terrible too. But like an educator goes into school in the morning and they consume whatever news they consume, they see whatever's happening, they have the conversations they have in the morning, and then they go in and in a sense, they have to kind of disconnect, right, from all of that and be really, really focused on the kids in front of them and what they're doing for a period of 6, 7, 8 hours, with maybe a little break at lunch. And then they get it all again at the end of the day, and they're catching up on all of that, and that can be kind of dysregulating too. So just like, is there another way? Is one of those better than the other? And like with all self-care, it probably depends. But like, is there like, yeah, how can educators face the day given this dynamic?
Yeah, that's it's so hard. And I think it's just something that came up in a conversation this morning I was having with teachers at a school about, we are talking about the self-care love languages, and someone was saying like, oh, kind of like quality time is mine, but like my students are my room over lunch, you know, and they want to be with me and I want to be with them. And so I'm like, I want to do that for them. And I also have to kind of recognize that's not my self-care. And I need to like meet that need in another way. And it shows the distinction of the ways that we have to sort of put things anytime we're doing any kind of caretaking or direct service providing. There are moments you have to like put your own needs not aside, maybe aside, not away. I would say like put them to the side for a little bit. So I think it is about like service, and in that way it's like looking at like how you can show up as the best teacher that you can possibly be and the most co-regulated human being that you can be, and then like what habits support that. And like I think it might be helpful here to think about it with habits. Like I know for me, I can take in the news if it is like, you know, if I have a little bit of time and space and some, especially some like really thoughtful analysis. I read this like monster Substack the other day. It took me like 20 minutes and it was all about the economy and what was happening. And it was like very critical. And I was like, I came out of that being like, that was kind of depressing, but like, wow, I kind of feel like I understand it better. And I felt expanded and sort of like, I have more of like a framework to understand this. And that's very different than me glancing at the headlines, because that's like a nervous tick of me just always checking my phone and the headlines. And the headlines are written and designed to fill us with dread. And that's just like part of how it is. And so my Kaizen has been like, I'm just not going to flip through the headlines if I don't have time to like click on something and read it and kind of give it some analysis. And then, you know, for me, it helps to talk about it too. And, you know, my husband and I, we talk a lot about like the things that we're reading and seeing in the news and to like ground it in a relationship. And so if you can do that and you have teachers that you can talk to and you have students that you can talk to, that might be a really good practice. But I do think, again, it's like we're probably, our nervous systems are not designed to take in the amount of information that we take in on a daily basis. They're not really designed to like have smartphones help us. We can kind of look at the statistics around all of that. They're not really helping our self-care wellness, or they take more than they give. But I would just encourage anyone who's listening to this, who's trying to find that right relationship, to notice how you feel when you take different actions around news and see if there's something that feels better or worse, and like try to, like the kids game, just try to go warmer towards what feels better, and like don't be afraid to let go of what feels worse, because like you'll get the news. Like people talk to you about the news, you'll see things.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to do like a lightning round robin for everyone in this last thing here, which is like, what is something new you've been doing for your self-care that you've taken up that's working, and where are you failing? Like where you're trying to do and it's not working, or you're reflecting on it. And I'll start because you just said something that was relevant to what I was going to share, which is people say all the time, right? Like you should have a morning routine where you just like get up and you take it really slow and you don't check the news or look at your phone right away and whatever. That does not work for me from like where my like default is, right? And so something I've noticed that was not intentional, but I've been doing recently is I do check all of that right away. Um, because I want to get all like what is happening today, like what is the day ahead of me, what's the news, what's my email, whatever. And then I do nothing for a while. And then I take it slow for a while before I actually start the work. So then I'm like, I've been like, you know, having tea in the morning before I eat and trying to do that and take it a little slower before I like rush into getting the kids ready or whatever I do, but and getting up a little earlier to be able to do that. So like having the time to actually like have a rest before I go 100 miles an hour. But for me, the like just don't look at anything right when you wake up. It didn't just like too much of a shock to my nervous system, doesn't work. So I like absorb it and then I give myself a buffer before I do anything about it. So I think that's something that's been working for me. I think the like what's not working, what's failing is to me is always like that, like what's the line between it's really tough to determine what's the most urgent thing and to just not respond to everything. And that's really hard for me to do because it seems like everything is at such a scale right now that it's very hard to discard things because it feels like you're discarding people who are at stake in those things. It's been hard to draw those lines.
If I can jump in there, that is definitely the thing that I feel like I'm failing at or wanting to work harder on for my own self-care, is just feeling like everything is a crisis. And that tends to be my default, is that like I, you know, am inclined to think anything that's coming up is like a crisis moment. And in this situation, I'm like, yeah, I'm right. Everything is a crisis. I don't really know what to do about it. And so I think for me, something that I want to reflect more on is how I can, I think, better direct my energy, because if I'm expending all my energy on every single thing that comes up, then eventually I'm not going to be showing up very well in the spaces that I need to. Uh, so that's definitely something that I want to reflect on a little bit better. And then something that's been working for me, I love being outside. So with the weather warming up, I'm very excited to be able to, spend more time in nature again, just literally touch grass always helps me. But in terms of a morning routine, I've been journaling since, I want to say, like August, and that's very new for me. That's not something that like I had done in previous years, but it helps me a lot. And I do it in the morning, which felt like a big lift at first, but now it's like I don't even think about it. It is so impactful for my like routine and general well-being that I make the time no matter what. Just to like get all of my thoughts out on paper, spill everything out, and then I just feel better and I feel lighter and I feel ready to start my day. So that is definitely something that I will be leaning into more.
That's great. Do you do is it the morning pages? Do you do morning pages?
No, I just like, I literally one day last year, I like found this really beautiful notebook. This is kind of embarrassing. I found a really pretty notebook in a bookstore and I was like, I'm going to buy this notebook because I like the way it looks and I'm going to figure out how to use it. And this is just what ended up happening. So it was kind of organic. Um, yeah.
That's great. Yeah. I love before I was a parent, I used to get up and write. There's this practice called the morning pages, which is from this book called The Artist Way, where you get up and just free write every morning for half an hour. And like my like best life is like doing the morning pages. Like you just get all the gunk out of your brain and then like just feel like so like fresh and creative. But I love hearing your practices. And I do want to just point out that it's very inspiring to hear about other people's self-care practices. And it's just such a simple thing if you are in a school environment and you are ever leading a meeting, or just to like ask people what they are doing. Because I think people do. This morning we were talking and someone said, oh, I want to get into cycling. And someone else is like, oh, I like lead the cycling group. Let me invite you. And I was like watching the self-care happen in real time. And so just to like bring it out. Yeah, what's hard, I'll start there, is that I was like, I'm gonna start working out this year. And both my husband and we both sort of like started going running and yoga, and then we went to Texas, and then my family went to Orlando, and kids have been sick, and it's just like one thing after another. I'm like, I have not gone running. And I'm like, I'm not saying that habit did not take fully, but it definitely got derailed from like how I saw it going through the spring. And I think that's real with our wellness. But something I'd say it's not a new practice, but something that's working for me right now is just really looking at my inner dialogue and how, I am reacting in situations, and how I am talking to myself, especially when things don't go exactly to plan, or there's uncertainty. And just it's so powerful to be able to like slow down and like reframe things for myself. And I do like that one because I can do it like in the car. I can do it even while like taking care of somebody else, but just to like have that dialogue with myself is a good self-care one. And I learned from the self-care love languages that those are words of affirmation that I offer to myself. That's a good style.
Yeah. This was a great conversation. And in the spirit of it's great to hear people's ideas about their own self-care, tell us if you're listening. You can email us. You can email wellness@weareempowered.org. Tell us what you're doing for your own self-care. We can share it out, and especially from educators about how you're managing all of this in your day, and all the things that are happening that are shocks to our nervous system, but trying to maintain and sustain yourself while you are in the fight as well. So Gracy, thank you so much for letting us turn the tables today.
Pleasure. Thank you for listening and asking and wanting to have this conversation.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.